They didn't hear it, not at first. The pulse that beat beneath East Africa was quiet, deep, far below the surface. It wasn't the kind of heartbeat that comforted. It was the kind that warned, that signaled change, that threatened everything we thought we understood about the land beneath our feet. For years, geologists had their eyes on the Afar Triangle, the stretch of scorched earth where Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Djibouti meet, a place where the sun burns with fury and the ground never quite sits still. But what they recently discovered sent a ripple across the scientific world. Earth itself is moving, breathing, splitting, and it's doing so from under Africa. This is not fiction. This is not prophecy. This is science. But the consequences, they are anything but ordinary. Right now beneath your very feet, beneath the vast savannas, bustling cities, and quiet villages of East Africa, something ancient is waking up. A process that has taken millions of years is accelerating, and if it continues at its current pace, Africa, as we know it, may never be the same again. In this documentary, we take you through the heartbeat of a continent, from hidden magma chambers to shifting fault lines, from the fears of local communities to the strategies of world powers watching closely, because when land moves, so do nations, and when continents break, so do economies, alliances, and lives. If you're watching this, you're not just curious. You're someone who understands that Africa's story is bigger than headlines. So stay with us, because what you're about to learn may not just reshape a map, it may reshape the future. The first clues came from the ground, literally, in the dry, cracked landscape of northern Ethiopia. People began to report strange sounds, rumblings deep under the soil, earthquakes that didn't last long but didn't feel natural. They weren't the result of tectonic collisions. They were something else, something rising. Then in 2005, the ground split to 60 kilometers of the earth tore open in just a few days. A massive gash that scientists now say was the visible birth of a new tectonic boundary. What they found wasn't just a tear, it was the beginning of a new ocean. Let that sink in. A new ocean inside Africa. In fact, the Afar region is one of the only places on Earth where you can stand on land and see continental drift in real time. But what's happening isn't just about rocks and lava. It's about what it means. Because this split, this process, called rifting, is not slowing down. It's speeding up, and if it continues, the entire Horn of Africa could separate from the rest of the continent. Countries like Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, and Tanzania could one day be an island chain floating beside a redefined Africa. Pause for a moment. Imagine that. Your home, your land, your country, not shifting by borders or politics, but by the planet itself. And yet, most of the world isn't paying attention. But we are. And we're asking the questions no one else is brave enough to ask. What happens to the people? What happens to the governments? What happens when the earth opens beneath a fragile society? If this story matters to you, if Africa's future matters to you, don't scroll past. Click like, leave a comment. Africa is rising even when the ground shakes. It helps this message reach more people who deserve to know what's happening. Let's continue. This isn't the first time a continent split. Millions of years ago, the world looked very different. All land was one, a supercontinent called Pangaea. Over time, it broke apart, creating the continents we know today. Now, Africa is going through a similar transformation, except this time, we're here to watch it happen. Satellite data now shows that the Rift Valley stretching from Ethiopia down to Mozambique is stretching. Some areas are pulling apart at 7 millimeters per year. That may not sound like much, but over decades, that's kilometers of movement. Cracks that widen, valleys that deepen, volcanoes that awaken. And beneath all of this is the pulse, the rhythmic upwelling of magma, deep in the Earth's mantle. It's like a breath, pushing against the crust. Scientists have only recently confirmed this strange, geologic pattern, magma rising and falling, like the lungs of the planet. It's this pulse that may one day break Africa. The people living on this fault line, They don't need scientists to tell them the ground is alive. They feel it in the way wells dry up too quickly, in how the wind shifts when the ground rumbles beneath their homes, in the sudden cracks that appear in walls, then grow like vines over time. In Ethiopia's Afar region, in northern Kenya's Turkana, even across Somalia's desolate stretches, locals know something is wrong. They speak in hushed tones of the land tearing itself. Elders recall old legends about the earth swallowing villages. Religious leaders call it a sign. Geologists call it science. But to the mother whose home is slipping into a widening trench, it's just fear. And here's the terrifying truth. No government in the region is truly prepared for what's coming. Think about this: roads that connect entire cities could split overnight. Water pipelines could break, leaving entire regions dry. National borders will have to be redrawn. Military outposts will become useless if cut off. And infrastructure, built decades ago with no knowledge of what lies beneath, may collapse in a matter of years. So why isn't this a global headline? Why isn't the world warning Africa? Because the consequences are not just environmental, they're economic. And whoever controls the new ocean will control a new chapter of global trade. That's why foreign powers are already watching. In the last decade, China has quietly invested billions in East African ports. Djibouti, Kenya's Lamu port, Ethiopia's dry ports, all being fortified, expanded, monitored. The U.S. has established drone bases near the rift. France maintains military facilities nearby. And quietly, Russia has offered geological surveying assistance to countries along the fault line. But this isn't about help, it's about positioning. Because once that ocean forms, even if it takes hundreds or thousands of years, whoever controls the choke points controls access to an entire sea. And the African people, most are still not being told the full story. If this matters to you, stop for a moment. Ask yourself, who will tell this story if we don't? If the land of Africa is cracking open, and the world stays silent, who pays the price? You can help bring this message forward. Click share, comment. Africa must control its own future, because the more this spreads, the more pressure we create for leaders to prepare and protect. Let's go deeper. Now imagine this. You're a farmer in southern Ethiopia. You've worked the same land for generations, but the rains are changing. The soil shifts beneath your crop rows. You wake one morning and your pasture is split by a crack 3 meters deep. No one comes. No government official. No journalist. No aid agency. Because the news isn't about you. It's about elections. It's about politics. But the earth doesn't care about votes. The earth moves, and it keeps moving. Already, displacement has begun. Hundreds of small communities across Kenya and Ethiopia have been forced to relocate due to shifting ground. In Turkana, infrastructure projects have stalled because the soil beneath is unstable. In Afar, geothermal stations have reported unusual underground heat bursts, an early warning of magma rising closer to the surface. And when magma reaches too close, it erupts, not just with fire, but with chaos. Because volcanic eruptions here don't just cause lava flow, they poison rivers, cut off roads, destroy farmland. And when people are desperate, they move. When thousands move, governments panic. When panic spreads, conflict begins. That's how a geological event becomes a humanitarian disaster. But that's just one path. There's another, one that Africa must urgently pursue. Preparation, education, cooperation. If East African nations begin coordinating, begin planning, this shift can be turned from crisis to opportunity. New shipping lanes, new tourism, new undersea cable routes, new geopolitical leverage. But the window is narrow, and the distractions are many. Civil wars, ethnic tensions, political corruption, and through it all, the ground keeps moving, slowly, silently, and stoppably. And if you're still watching, thank you. You're part of the few who understand this is not just about geology. It's about power, survival, destiny. Stay with us. The most shocking part is still ahead. When the land splits, It doesn't ask for permission, but the governments that sit on it must make decisions. Right now, countries like Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, Somalia, and Eritrea share a rift that doesn't care about flags. This growing scar across the earth is forcing East African nations into a future they haven't planned for. And that's a dangerous thing, because when countries don't prepare, others do, and others are already preparing. Let's be blunt. There are foreign intelligence reports being written today in Washington, in Paris, in Beijing, that analyze every centimeter of Africa's rift. They estimate mineral value, future shipping paths, military positioning. These reports are not science fiction. They are investment guides, and Africa is the product. There are satellite photos being taken every 12 hours over Afar, every inch of movement tracked, not for warning, but for profit. And this is where diplomacy breaks down. Because if Ethiopia wants to build a dam near the rift, but Kenya fears the land may not support it, who decides? If Somalia sees port opportunity in a newly forming gulf, but Djibouti claims the rights, what happens? Disputes, tensions, border clashes. You see, the land isn't just cracking, relationships are too. And while regional blocs like the African Union or IGAD have frameworks for cooperation, they've yet to fully acknowledge the rift crisis for what it is. Not just a climate or science issue, but a geopolitical earthquake. And all of this is happening while most people remain unaware. But maybe, just maybe, this story has been told before, just not in the way we expect. Because ancient African oral traditions, passed down through generations, speak of the earth crying, of lands that open without warning, of rivers swallowed whole, of ancestors warning from beneath. In Ethiopia's Omo Valley, elders speak of a great parting, a time when the land would divide and people of the same tongue will be separated by water. In parts of northern Kenya, there are rock paintings believed to show split earth to suns, and smoke rising from the ground, long before the concept of magma or tectonics was even known. Is it coincidence? Maybe. But Africa has always spoken in symbols, and maybe now it's speaking in earthquakes. If you're still with us, take a moment. Look around your home. Look at the floor beneath your feet. Now imagine it shifting, not just in tremor, but in destiny. This isn't just nature. It's a test of whether Africa will own its future or once again let it be written by others. If this matters to you, comment below. Africa must lead its story. Your words help this truth rise in the algorithm and rise in real minds. Let's keep going. There's a growing term among scientists, the invisible ocean. It refers to the underground layer of magma and water pressure that's slowly expanding beneath the rift. It's not yet a sea, but it behaves like one. It pushes, it swells, it erodes. Some call it a baby ocean. Others say it's a geological illusion. But one thing is clear, it's growing. And if it reaches the surface, the land will flood. Not with rain, not with tide, but from beneath. That's why in 2023, a team of volcanologists sounded the alarm. The Afar region is sitting on an unstable oceanic crust. In plain English, the floor beneath East Africa is becoming seafloor. Now here's what few people realize. Seafloor isn't like continental rock. It's thinner, it's weaker, it breaks faster. That's why the next few decades are crucial. If Africa doesn't invest now, in new infrastructure, in geological monitoring, in disaster preparedness, the next earthquake might not just shake a village, it might sink one. And yet, this is still not a story of fear, it's a story of power. Because, if Africa leads this transformation, it becomes the author of a new age. Imagine new cities built beside this forming ocean. New global shipping lanes that don't depend on the Red Sea. New African-controlled ports that rival Dubai or Singapore. It can happen, but not if we sleep, not if we ignore the pulse beneath us. And if you believe in this vision, take this moment to act. Share this video. Send it to someone who still thinks Africa is silent. Because beneath our silence, the earth is roaring. The earth doesn't just split and stop, it shifts the sky too. Climate scientists now believe the East African Rift isn't only shaping the land, it's also affecting the weather. Here's how. As the rift deepens, it alters wind patterns. Elevation changes shift rainfall routes. Where once there were reliable wet seasons, now drought lingers. And where the land dips lower, flash floods strike harder. In Ethiopia's Rift Valley, lakes that were once shrinking are now rising. But it's not a blessing, it's a warning. These lakes are fed from underground channels that no one can fully map. If they flood too quickly or collapse due to seismic activity, entire communities could vanish in minutes. In Kenya, local farmers near Lake Baringo and Lake Bogoria have already witnessed this. In just 2 years, the lake swallowed schools, roads, churches. The water didn't come from the sky, it came from below. And what happens when your land, your home, your soil is no longer stable? You move. This is the beginning of a climate migration wave that has nothing to do with politics or even drought. It has to do with Earth's bones shifting. Already, small nomadic groups in northern Kenya and parts of southern Ethiopia have begun moving permanently away from ancestral lands toward city edges. And when thousands of people migrate at once, tensions rise, borders strain, cities overcrowd, and history tells us what comes next. Conflict, not because people want war, but because people need space. And this is what few African leaders are willing to admit. This isn't just a science issue. It's not even just a climate issue. It's a national security issue. What is a president to do when his country's map is shifting in real time? What is a governor to do when his province is cracking at the seams? What is a chief to do when his people say, "The land beneath us is cursed," and they walk away? Let's be very clear. If African leadership does not acknowledge the rift as a top priority, they will be caught unprepared by the very ground they govern. And the cost won't just be political. It will be human. It will be irreversible. But here's where it gets even deeper. In 2024, a secret report leaked from a regional meeting between East African ministers. It mentioned the possibility of establishing a Continental Rift Commission, a body to oversee land risk zones, infrastructure audits, and relocation policies. But the plan was shelved. Why? Because it might cause panic. Imagine that. Rather than prepare the people, they were afraid of telling the truth. This is where you come in, because awareness is the first step toward accountability. If you're still here, if you've watched this far, you are part of the few willing to seek the truth behind the silence. Don't underestimate that power. Comment: Africa must prepare now. Let the leaders see we are watching. Let the youth know that we are awake. And let the world know we will not be victims of our own silence. Let's go further. There's a moral question beneath this geological one. If you knew your land was cracking, if you knew your water source might vanish, if you knew your child's school might collapse in 10 years, would you wait? Would you be patient? Would you trust promises? Or would you act? That's the decision facing millions across East Africa. And while foreign investors debate mineral rights, and while news channels talk about war elsewhere, the biggest battle is right here, between truth and denial, between warning and silence, between history and the future. Africa stands on a fault line, not just geological, but generational. The earth is moving. Will the people move with it, or be crushed beneath it? Every time Africa shifts, the world profits. That's how it's always been. From colonial railroads built to extract minerals, to modern ports financed by foreign banks with foreign interests, Africa's movement, literal or political, has always been turned into someone else's gain. But this time, things can be different, because this time, the ground is moving beneath everyone, not just one region. And if leaders, thinkers, investors, and young minds wake up early enough, the rift can become a gateway, not a grave. Let's look ahead. If the rift forms a new sea, as expected over millions of years, but with visible changes happening already, then a brand new African coastline will emerge. Somalia, Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Djibouti, Eritrea, Sudan. New ports will be needed. New shipping routes will become available. And whoever controls that infrastructure controls the trade. Here's a powerful example. Right now, global trade relies heavily on choke points, like the Suez Canal. Imagine if East Africa, with its new coastline, could develop a parallel lane for cargo and energy transport, reducing pressure on North African routes and giving Africa more leverage in global negotiations. Imagine oil from the Gulf of Guinea being routed through new pipelines toward the Eastern Rift Zone, then exported through East African megaports that didn't exist before. Now imagine those ports aren't built and owned by France or China or the US, but by Africans. For Africa, this is what's at stake, a new economy. But only if Africa learns from its past, because make no mistake, there are already foreign powers drawing maps, outlining where their companies will build, mine, and drill once the land opens up. Some are even offering military protection deals in advance, under the guise of stability. We've seen this before. It starts with a loan, then an agreement, then an occupation without the army. And suddenly, the rift is no longer an African frontier. It's a foreign asset zone. And that is why this moment, not tomorrow, not 5 years from now, this moment is when Africa must claim ownership of what is coming. It starts with awareness. It continues with unity, and it ends with action. Now pause and breathe. Ask yourself, how many young Africans even know the rift exists? How many schools teach this? How many leaders even speak about it? If we don't talk about the earth shaking beneath us, who will? That's why this video matters. That's why you matter. If you're still watching, you are part of a movement that says, we don't fear the shift, we understand it, and we'll shape it. Comment Africa owns its future if you agree, because silence is no longer an option. Let's bring this full circle. The rift is not just a tear in the earth. It's a metaphor for Africa itself, stretched between past and future, torn by internal struggles and external influence, but still holding together, still fighting, still rising. And maybe, just maybe, this natural phenomenon is also a spiritual one. Maybe it's the earth reminding Africa of its power, of its responsibility, of its heartbeat, because beneath all the data, beneath the politics, beneath the rocks and magma, there is something deeper. The pulse, it's still beating, it's still rising, it's still calling. Well, Africa, listen.